Senator Lisa Murkowski, welcome to The Assignment.
Great to be with you this morning. Thank you.
So you have been asked to write a book many times.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you writing one now?
Because I've been asked to write a book many times. Actually,
I have declined many times. Well, because here's the thing. When you write a book, you got to come out and talk. And
I didn't realize that part of it.
Okay.
I have this story, and it kind of began really with 2010 and the write-in campaign, just kind of the history that really Alaskans made with that amazing event. When I think about acts of political defiance, it was not Lisa Murkowski politically defying the norms. It was Alaskans saying, "We don't care how they do it on the outside." That's a bumper sticker, actually. We don't care. This is the person that we want, and we're going to figure out a way to return her. And so, beginning then, people were like, "You need to write a book. You need to put this down." And I tried a couple times. And you get busy. It's hard. I don't know how to write a book. My sister's a writer. I said, "Carol, you got to help me." She says, "I'm too close to you." We tried.
Were you too close to it?
I was too close to it.
Okay.
And I think it was just too fresh. You didn't know if, okay, well, maybe this is not going to be so interesting. Maybe it's going to be an event that was interesting and exciting for a brief moment in time, and then people move on to other things. But
narrator, we would not move on to other things because that turned out to be a very formative moment, like in our politics, not just your personal politics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you write about in the book. First I want to start, when I'm talking to lawmakers, want to understand how they think about power. Can you talk about the first person in your life who you saw either exuded or wielded power, and sort of how that informs who you are as a politician today?
The political figure, when I think about power, one of my mentors in Alaska, and I write about her in the book, actually happens to be my sister's mother-in-law, Arla Sturgielewski. Began as a local politician working on the municipal planning board, became a state senator. She was the first woman to run for governor, the first woman to really make her mark in our current legislature. And it was her style and how she approached governing and leadership and power. Very humble, very down to earth, very, very collaborative.
Was that very different from your own father?
Yes, because he has a more stereotypical man. This is my idea. This is how we're going to move this. Arliss was a collaborator. It didn't really make any difference who took the credit as long as we got the job done. And so it was important for me, particularly as a young woman that was kind of coming into my own politically, to see that demonstrated by a woman. True strength, quiet competence, firm, unyielding, effective, but in a very different style than my father's approach, for instance, or, quite honestly, most of the male leaders that I recall at that time. It was important for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Meaning you found it striking? There was something about the way she approached it, or was it just the idea that someone was offering you a different way to be?
I think it was the latter. It was a recognition that you could have your own style. You didn't have to be the woman's voice in the man's presentation or how he approached it. That you could be very effective with your own style, and she really manifested that for the first time, I think.
This is important because we're going to talk a lot about style. We're going to talk a lot about approach to politics. So it's interesting that you chose kind of that person in the book. You, in the end, have talked about your 2010 race as an inflection point for you. It was also an inflection point for the country because it was a moment where we saw Tea Party candidates start to overtake incumbents. and you had lost your primary. And I tried to convey to like some of my producers, I was like, you don't understand. She didn't just lose the primary. In the book, you talk about you were sort of like political roadkill. Like the caucus was like, you can't have those committee seats. Goodbye. We're not going to be seeing you. And how much did that affect, even more than losing, how much did that affect how you saw the party at that time?
It's really hard to say that they were doing wrong or that it was not right, that they had kind of discarded me. The fact of the matter is I lost. I lost a Republican Party. So the party now had a different candidate, right?
But the party was changing in a very profound way.
Oh, the party was changing. The party was changing, and I don't deny that at all. You know, the Republican consultants wouldn't be there for me. My colleagues had moved on to endorse the Republican nominee, and I say what I'm telling you is that I didn't feel ill will towards them. They did what they had to do. Now, did I feel that the party had shifted in a way that we had not anticipated? That is absolutely true. We saw it play out in Alaska in my race, but before that, earlier in the year, my friend Bob Bennett from Utah had been kind of the first fatality, if you will, to the Republican, to the Tea Party and what had happened in Utah. And he had advised me, literally 10 days before the primary. He says, you have to take this seriously. But Bennett warned me. He said, they will take you out. And I said, Bob, Alaska is different. Alaska is different. That's not going to happen here. We're going to be just fine. And I get taken out. The next day after it was clear that the impact of the Tea Party had been as significant as it had been in Alaska, I called up Mike Castle, who, if you'll recall, was running in Delaware. He was up against a Tea Party candidate. And Mike said, no, Lisa, I got this. It's not going to happen to me. And look what happened. He gets taken out by Christine, I forget her last name, I'm not a witch.
Yeah, that was like 25,000 scandals ago.
It
seems very quaint now.
Yeah.
But also a kind of candidate who said outrageous things, a kind of candidate who, right? And it's interesting, when you look back at that period of politics, most political watchers thought that the politics of the Tea Party, emphasis on fiscal responsibility or states' rights, that is what would last, and that the style, whether it be Sarah Palin's kind of disregard for a lot of different norms, or those candidates who said outrageous things, that was going to go away. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's what happened. It feels
exactly
like it
the
right?
reverse,
like the fiscal thing, not so much. The fiscal hawks went back to their nests, but the style remained. Mm-hmm. And again, Alaska was at the forefront with Sarah Palin. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about, because you write about her in your book, and I know some people have talked about the relationship that you guys have both coming out of Alaska. What was it about her to you that ushered in a new kind of politic?
Well, she clearly has a populist appeal. I mean, we saw that. In Alaska, when she first came onto the scene, here she is. She's a small town mayor, or a mayor of a small town, and but she was one who she connected with people in a way that you could not deny that charisma.
I feel like I'm trying to ask in a subtle way how you both came out of Alaska. Like, you were the most Alaska is big.
Alaska is big.
I mean, even your dad at one point considered her appointing her to his seat. And so I don't know if you ever look in the mirror and say, like, I don't know how we came from the same place. Like, what is it that you're laughing, but like, I think this is a real thing people want to know, because we don't know if your path is extinct or hers is.
Oh, that's a fair question. I think what it says is how diverse and how eclectic Alaska really is, and how
But is your way of politics
Well-
done?
no,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Because I look around and I see
Absolutely
way
not.
more Sarah Palins than I see Lisa Murkowski's.
Well, then you need to come to Alaska. You need to come to Alaska.
I was waiting for that invitation.
Yeah,
and
you are more than welcome.
We are 10 minutes into the interview.
Yeah. I'll tell you why I think that my approach to politics resonates in Alaska, and it kind of ties into some of the political reforms you've seen in Alaska recently with
But
the
I
adoption.
actually don't mean Alaska. I mean nationally.
Well-
there are not more Lisa Murkowskis. There are more Sarah Palins.
Okay, I'm not going to debate you on whether or not there's more of me or more of her. I think those that are more like me are perhaps quieter about it, and those that are more in the kind of more outwardly MAGA are louder about it. But I look at Alaska specifically, and I see, again, these voices in the middle, those who don't want the aggressive partisan bickering, who want to try to see things actually get done, who just are tired of everything being divided between red and blue and R and D, and they just say, can't we just have better communities, better schools, better whatever?
But do people vote that way? I know you're saying Alaska does, but the reason why I'm harping on this is it feels like the group of people who talk the way you do is just smaller. It's much smaller than it used to be. And there are times, even in the book, for instance, you talk about Mitt Romney speaking out against Donald Trump and being very forceful in the way he was doing it, and the reasons you weren't, that you were running for office, that you didn't feel it could make a difference. I'm trying to understand if those decisions, those moments of silence, are why we are where we are.
I think that there are consequences when you voice your opinion. And when I say consequences, I'm not saying retribution, if you will, but you're subject to criticism, right? And I think what you're seeing is people are it's too wearying. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just not going to. And that is worrisome, because when people stop engaging, then those of us that are elected to office feel like, well, the signals we're getting from folks back home is everything's okay. Well, everything's not okay. Everything's not okay. And so how can we encourage you? And this is where, I guess, one of the reasons why I felt it was still timely to focus on a book was because I think people need to have some level of hope and optimism that maybe, just maybe, things can change, that maybe there are people who are willing to be that voice in the middle, even if it means that, you're roadkill in the middle. That's what happens when you stand in the middle of the road. But
I was wondering
there
if you
has to
put
be
the-
encouragement to that.
But I was actually wondering if you put this anecdote in the book also, because did you have some regrets? You spoke so highly of Romney, right, in that moment. But we can think of, between the two of us, many more senators, people who tried to, over the years, say, maybe I believe Donald Trump went too far in this scenario or that scenario. And you seem to be revisiting that moment for a reason. And what do you think that reason was?
I try not to spend a lot of time on regrets, wishing that I had done something different, because in this job, you just don't have time to do that. And as I tell people, I said, I was asked the other day, do you regret voting for this nominee? It was actually RFK. Do you regret voting for him?
In the light of his changes to the vaccine board.
In the light of his changes to the
Yeah.
vaccine. And I said, yeah, I'm mad at what he has said. I don't think that this is a way to regain trust and confidence in the system of vaccines. But I don't have the opportunity to redo that. I've just got to figure out now, what do I do with it? And so, Romney, I think what I try to share in the book is how I get to some of these difficult decisions, not without extraordinarily deep introspection and just review as to, okay, am I going to be good with this? Am I going to be able to live with my decision at the end of the day? Because that's ultimately the charge to me.
I think there is a perception that maybe there are lawmakers who are going along to get along, or maybe they want a certain outcome and so they're willing to put up with a lot. And what people are seeing is cynicism. Instead of like maybe fear, as you said, at taking the long road, people may be looking at it instead. I think I remember a Saturday Night Live skit along these lines, that like Republicans somehow were all disliking Trump, hating Trump, but going along with it in public. And do you hear that? I'm sure you hear things from all sides.
Yeah.
But the idea that Republicans went along with a lot if it got them what they wanted.
I worry about that. Because we don't want to be in a situation where basically the ends justify the means. So, for instance, let's use tariffs as an example. A month or so ago, President moves forward unilaterally with tariffs, declaring this emergency, using the authorities that he had under emergency action. I don't happen to think that a trade imbalance that has existed for a period of time constitutes an emergency. But what I was hearing from many colleagues was that, well, no, I agree with where the president is going. We want to get these other countries to a better place in terms of trade. So I'm okay with where he's going. So I'm okay with how he's getting there. We have to remember that as soon as we give that free pass to a president of our party, the next president, who may not be of our party, who tries to use the same approach, we're going to be as critical of them as the Democrats are now of Trump. We have to make sure that we've got some fidelity here, some fidelity to the rule of law, some fidelity to our responsibility. And so I worry about the purity test. There's this expectation that you've got to line up because this is what your party is asking. And so, again, to take it back to why I spend so much time in the book talking about how I get somewhere, is because, believe me, the easiest thing to do would just be to follow the party line. But is that what people want? Do they want us to just be the Republican Party chairman sitting in there and casting my vote that way? Or do they want me to think for them? Do they want me to represent the uniqueness that comes with Alaska? Or do they want me to just be part of the party?
We are in a moment with a climate of fear, and a fear around political violence. You had these Minnesota lawmakers, one who was killed, who was a pragmatic politician in her state, along with others of the attempted murder there. And right away, you had a senator, right, Mike Lee, kind of casting aspersions online, saying, oh, well, this is what the Marxists deserve. I mean, just wrong on so many counts. Right. The politics of the alleged shooter, what that would mean, the implications. First, can you give me your reaction to that? Because it has become something of a conversation in the Senate.
Political violence against anybody is wrong. It's just wrong. And so to make light of it or to suggest one way or another that there was how do I want to say it? That somehow or other the victims had kind of brought it upon themselves. I don't even. It
I
just
know,
makes
but
me
it's also
sick to
the
even
native
say
tongue
that.
of the internet. Like when I
Yes.
think about that world
Yes.
online of influencers going back and forth and political chatter on X, on Truth Social, et cetera, that's extremely common. And Mike Lee in particular.
And extremely wrong.
Say more.
Yeah, same. It's just wrong.
But it seems to work. There are certain lawmakers who, I mean, this is how
But
they have
why?
been propelled.
Why
Now I
is
need
it
to know from
working?
you.
Why is it working? And It seems that the more aggressive we become with our words, the more defiant we become with our positions, the more people eat it up. We've moved to a time where temperance and moderation is just like for your great aunt. Instead of saying, yes, let's cool the temperature down here. Let's dial the rhetoric back. Let's keep us all safer. The comments like that don't make anybody safer. What they do is they cause to divide us even deeper and make the rancor even more harsh. So I don't know why we are seeing this other than maybe the public is expecting it or demanding it. But I don't even want to think then about how we get back from that.
If you want to cool the temperature, shouldn't more of you been saying to each other, hey, chill, like
Yes.
this is unnecessary?
Yes.
And why don't people do that?
Well, and what I will suggest is more of those conversations are happening directly. Like, yeah, bad thing. Really, we need to dial this back. But there's a difference between what is said privately, one-on-one with one another, or in a small group, versus to the broader audience through the media. And I again, my sense is that there is this need to make sure that my base knows that I'm a tough guy, Levi. I don't ascribe to that, and maybe that makes me odd man out. I don't know, but I've been in the Senate now for a while. We didn't operate like this before. We just didn't. There was a civility. We would disagree. There would be legendary political battles. And some people just really did not like one another as individuals. But you didn't see that denigration of one another publicly. There was a decorum that is gone. And I think that is problematic for the country because people look to their president, they look to their members of Congress, they look to their governors, their mayors, they look to their elected officials for leadership.
Do they?
I think they do. I've
had moments where I'm watching you guys up
them.
there and I'm like, okay, no oversight. No one's doing any real oversight of anything anymore. When it comes to legislation, we're waiting for a speaker or a leader to pretty much tell us how to vote. And I sometimes, other than the raising money, I'm like, what do lawmakers even do anymore? Like, am I looking?
Maybe I can just suggest that you are too close to it.
Yeah. That's a kind thing to say, but do you know what I mean? Like,
no,
in this
I know
era,
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
If you're able to survive, do you have any lessons for other people, right? Because in the end, you're like, come join politics. But I'm like, I don't know how you do it if you're not Lisa Murkowski.
Serve some way, one way or another, whether it is on your school board or your assembly or just being involved with your community. It doesn't require that you be an elected member, you go out and fundraise, but just be involved, be engaged, and in a place where you can help make a difference. I think we are seeing good people who say, you wouldn't catch me in an assembly meeting for love nor money, because they're turned off by just what they consider to be the unappetizing political environment that we have there. So how do you change it? You've got to stick with it and demonstrate it doesn't have to be that way. Because I'm convinced that after a point, the people who want to make their partisan issues and say, we're going to ban these books, so I want to get on the school board so that I can take care of that. After a while, maybe they're going to get tired of public service is actually hard work, and you don't actually get to ban books every single day, every single meeting in your school board meeting. Sometimes you just have to work with really dreary things like the budget. Okay, maybe they wander off after a while because governing is hard, and I have to remain optimistic. I mean, every single one of these questions that you're asking is absolutely valid, and it's absolutely the moment that we are in. But I cannot accept that it has to be this way going forward, that we will forever be this wholly divided, and not just divided, but bitterly divided nation. We won't survive as a bitterly divided nation. If we're going to be this amazing country with all of these extraordinary opportunities, we can't eat ourselves up with our own internal divisions. And that's where we're headed right now.
When the president was willing to call in military to support ICE on the streets of LA during those protests, you've been asked about whether you think people calling him authoritarian was valid. How have you thought about that since?
I think the comment that I made was, is he being authoritarian, or is it Trump being Trump? I think we are seeing authoritarian acts.
Is there a red line for you?
I have told people that when it comes to legislating, I don't like to advertise what my red line is, because I've got to negotiate, right? But I think that when you have clearly overstepped that rule of law, when you have defiantly pushed back on the Supreme Court as a president, and said, I'm going to disregard that, I think those are red lines.
Another thing that you're faced with right now, that quote unquote big beautiful bill, and the conversation about entitlements and Medicaid cuts, for example. You have some voices holding on, saying, look, I don't think this is right. But where are you on that bill now? How are you thinking about it?
Well, it is evolving. It is still a work in progress. And so again, when your leadership, when you're the negotiators that are trying to craft this, you might make two people over here happy when you've made an adjustment, but you might have just upset, and beyond upset, you may have lost the votes of three over here.
People have been very interested in seeing Senator Hawley from Missouri sort of speak up on behalf of Medicaid, of all things. I wanted to put this to you because, again, thinking about that Tea Party period where people cared about like the fiscal hawks, it's not the fiscal hawks that seem to be leading the obstacles here. It's the people who are kind of defending a certain kind of spending, which is Medicaid. Help me square that. Like, is that still Republican?
Yes. Is it a different kind of Republican? Yes. And I've had some good conversations with Senator Hawley about this, because we're in this same camp in making sure that we don't see Medicaid cuts that harm the most vulnerable, right? But he has made clear, and you've certainly seen it in his statements, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth here, but the president has as well, that so many of the people that supported President Trump for president are people who are blue collar, lower income, for whom Medicaid is important to them. And so has it changed? Yes. But is there a real reason that you're seeing a focus on Medicaid right now from some of the more conservative members? Yes, because it has significant impact on their constituencies.
Are you worried people will turn to Medicare to look for cuts or changes to get to the math they want?
So, there are some areas, I think legitimate areas within Medicare and Medicaid where you have you have structures in place or things that have been allowed to build where we can look at and say, you know what, that is that's a method that's being used that isn't equitable, isn't fair, and needs to be addressed. You put it in the legitimate account of waste, fraud, and abuse. And so when we say absolutely nothing can be done when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, it limits your ability to really address some challenges that I think by all rights should be. Now, in the eye of the beholder, obviously, I happen to think that the situation with provider taxes and how states that have higher allowances for the provider taxes, my review of that is it looks like there's some gaming of the system there. It's challenging because people don't want to know the details. All they know is what they've heard, which is, you're going after Medicare. You're going after Medicaid. So this is why you haven't seen why you really haven't seen reforms.
What it means is
good,
there's
bad, or
also,
indifferent.
there's just a handful of you who are considered potential votes to put this thing over or to cause problems for it. And you've been in this position over and over and over again now, where you're one of 1, 2, 3 votes that everybody is looking at. And you're the office that their phone rings off the hook when people make threats on social media or whatever it is. You're at the center of something. And are you ever scared there?
I tell you, I worry about my staff because it puts a lot on them. You're right, the phones ring. And it's like nonstop. And it's not just the receptionists that are answering the phones. It's everybody else in the office that's now tasked to listen to this. And sometimes it's great stuff saying, hang in there, Lisa. And other times it's awful. And that's hard on them.
What's awful?
Like, foul language, threatening, the leaving a message anonymously threatening, what I consider to just be stupid stuff, but just being mean and ugly. If you want to weigh in on a bill, weigh in on a bill. Talk to me about why you don't like it, but don't just call up and say you're stupid, you're an idiot, you need to get in line. If there are threats that are left, we report those as we should.
Do you take those threats seriously in a way that you didn't maybe 10 years ago?
I think we all have to consider the environment that we are in. Yes, I have to. And I think it's not just members of the United States Senate, right? I think you have to acknowledge that there is an anger that is out there in our society today, and you have to be aware and not dismiss it, as hard as that is. I've got to be aware.
You write that you learn that Trump responds to strength and bluffs, but if he doesn't get what he wants, he moves on. And I thought that was sort of an interesting thing to write about. And it made me wonder what advice you have for other sort of targets of the White House, so to speak, the universities or the attorneys or public officials, students. Like, what do you say to these institutions right now that are talking as though they are fearful?
They need to believe in themselves and their mission. You just do. It maybe is. It's easier to say than do.
Yeah. I mean, you had to tell a room full of nonprofits. I think this went viral in April. Look, I get it. You're afraid. I get it. There's uncertainty. So,
and I feel that fear. I hear it from you. I can relate to what you're talking about. And sometimes it's really hard to speak up because there is that fear of retaliation, and retaliation is real, and we're seeing that. But you've got to figure out how to find your voice even when it's hard. It's hard.
do you expect to use your voice more? Do you expect to be louder? Because frankly, a lot of times when I meet lawmakers who are in that phase, they're also heading for the exits.
It shouldn't make a difference whether you're headed for the exits or not. I think sometimes there is that fear that, well, if I speak out, if I vote for impeachment, I will never survive another election. And I guess my response back would be, is any job, is any position worth compromising your own personal conviction and integrity? I don't think it should be. Don't let that position define you, but do the right thing.
Well, Senator Murkowski, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you.
Turns out your dad was right, making you think about going into politics.
Darn that dad.
Yeah, they're annoying that way.
Yeah, they are.
But thank you. I really
I appreciated this, Adi.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed the conversation.